Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So after a 20-month wait to finally get an answer to whether or not this ABK deal is going to go through, after 20 months of rampant speculation and fanboys pretending that they know how the law works on Twitter, and after 5 days of one of the most insane roller coasters of a court hearing I've ever heard, not that I pay attention to most of them, but point remains, we finally have a ruling on whether or not this ABK deal can go through. And it's looking pretty good for Xbox. So let me get you caught up on exactly what happened with this FTC court hearing, because there's been a lot of information just kind of thrown around about this subject. Some of it true, a lot of it false, and just frankly misinformed. I've gone out of my way to talk to Luke Steele, who is an M&A merger and acquisition lawyer, about this subject to try and better understand it myself. I've gone and I've done a lot of research. I've watched a lot of the Hogue Law videos on the subject. I have done everything in my power to find out what the truth of this is for myself. I highly recommend, because I am not a lawyer, that if you want a deeper dive onto these subjects, that you go and you do that as well. You can go and read the documentation on the FTC website. You can go and watch a Hogue Law video. He is a mergers and acquisition lawyer. He can break it down in a way that I am simply not capable of doing. So with that in mind, let me share with you what I have found. Basically, to summarize it as best as I can, the FTC had gone to a judge to try and get an injunction granted that would have prevented Xbox from completing their Activision Blizzard King merger prior to their actual court case, their hearing. That's right now it's slated for August. Now, after 5 days of going back and forth between the FTC bringing up their witnesses and getting cross-examined by Xbox, 5 days of this, Judge Corley, the judge who was presiding over this subject, has come back and pretty definitively denied the injunction. She published, I think it was like a 56-page document that 100% disagrees with pretty much everything the FTC said. She all but says they don't have a case, that they were unable to prove any level of harm would be caused to the consumer by this merger being put through, and so she has denied this injunction. And you might be saying that's not that big of a deal because they still have the actual court case in August, right? That's what I would have thought as well. However, I have been told that this injunction is, for a multitude of reasons, actually more important than the court case itself. Here's why. First of all, this Activision Blizzard King merger had a cutoff date of, I believe it was July 18th, so about a week from when I'm recording this, wherein if they had hit that date and the deal had not been closed yet, Xbox would have had to pay Activision Blizzard $3 billion for effectively wasting their time, and then gone back to the Activision Blizzard King board to renegotiate and decide whether or not they wanted to continue trying to push this deal through. Which, after 20 months, most people close to the subject were saying they wouldn't have done. They would have simply walked away from the deal and moved on to different acquisitions, or taken a step back and licked their wounds and figured out what their next step was. So, if this injunction had been granted, the deal would have been dead pretty much on the spot. Another reason why this injunction is more important than the court case is because, on top of that prior aspect, this also sets a precedent for the August court case, wherein a judge has now definitively said, after hearing the arguments from Xbox and the arguments from the FTC, that there is absolutely no harm that can be caused to the consumer by this merger. A legal precedent is one of the most powerful things in law. If you can point to a previous court case and say, this judge already decided on this exact same situation and said whatever, then there is a extremely high chance that that is what is going to be decided again. Precedent is overturned extremely rarely, and so having this precedent set is pretty much a dead ringer for that trial may as well not happen. In fact, there are some people who are saying that if this deal closes, they might just not do the trial at all, or if they do, it'll be mostly for show. Now, this injunction being denied is effectively the last nail in the coffin for people who were hoping that this deal would be canceled or blocked for any number of reasons, be it either your PlayStation and you're afraid of what Xbox is going to do with Call of Duty or whatever, or if you're a PlayStation fanboy and you just don't want Xbox to have nice things, I guess. I don't know. It gets messy. But this injunction not being granted effectively means that this deal is done. This deal can close. It's pretty much done. The only things that still stand in the way of this deal is, number one, that court case in August. They can close and presumably will close before it, but if that court case, by some miracle on part of the FTC, decides that there is in fact harm, then they could force Xbox to divest ABK and effectively undo the deal, which would really suck for Xbox because I don't know how much of the money they would get back in that situation. My guess would be not all of it. Maybe not any of it. I don't actually know how that part works. However, the other thing that they still have to get past is the CMA. The CMA, the Competition Markets Authority, is the UK equivalent of the FTC. That's the American Federal Trade Commission. They are the groups that decide on whether or not a merger is going to harm consumers. They stand in the way of big companies getting too big to a point where they can completely control trade and cause a monopoly and just all that gross capitalistic stuff that people hate, right? The CMA has previously blocked this exact deal. I think it was more than a month ago, they ruled to block this deal, and it's been in appeals, and it's been this whole mess where the rest of the UK government is sort of against that decision, and they've been fighting back and forth. However, within a couple hours of the FTC's injunction being denied, they have immediately gone back to Microsoft and decided to basically cancel that appeal process and renegotiate to see if they can find a way to close the deal. Effectively, they know that now that the FTC is beaten and all of these other smaller trade commissions across the world have already passed it, the UK doesn't want to be the only people to block this deal because that would be bad for specifically their consumers, and it would just be a messy situation for everyone involved. So now that they know they're the odd man out in terms of actually being able to block this, they're coming back to the table and wanting to come to a solution where they can feel like they accomplished something even though they really kind of didn't. And it seems like, based on the opinions and reportings of one CNBC reporter called David Faber, he seems to think they've already found an agreement, which apparently would involve a small divestiture, which is basically just there's some aspect of ABK that they would have to spin off into its own subsidiary that would not be owned by Microsoft. But based on how fast that deal that agreement would have had to have been come to, just because literally it was like within the span of a couple of hours, it must be something that is so small that it's literally just the CMA wanting to be able to say, yeah, we really stuck it to them. Like they want to be able to sort of justify the fact that they blocked it in the first place. And so they're like, hey, can you spit off this very small thing just to make us look good? And Xbox is like, yeah, sure, dude, whatever, right? Like that's what it feels like to me, and that seems to be the vibe that I'm getting from talking to Luke Steele and all these other... Anyway, it doesn't matter. So basically, the point of me saying all that is that the CMA has come back to the table, and they are also very close to just allowing this deal through. So it seems to me that this deal is done, and that Microsoft will 100% be allowed to close this monumental merger in the next week or two. And that's really exciting. So I say this deal is really exciting, and it is, but I haven't exactly kept it a secret that I don't really care about this deal on a personal level. Like, I don't care about the majority of games that ABK makes, right? Call of Duty, Diablo, Overwatch, Crash, Spyro, Tony Hawk, any of their mobile stuff. Like, all of those games are good, I'm sure. Like, I'm not telling you that they're bad, so don't get into my comment section getting mad at me because I said Diablo was a bad game or something, because I'm sure that they're great. They just don't really speak to me personally, right? They're not games that I care about. And then the ones that I do care about, like Warcraft and StarCraft, well, I don't have time to play an MMO, and Warcraft hasn't been allowed to be anything other than an MMO forever. And StarCraft has been dormant for, what, like a decade, maybe more? So, yeah, ABK really hasn't done anything for me personally in a really long time. So the things, the aspects of this deal that are exciting to me are things that we're unfortunately probably not going to see for a really long time. Like, it comes down to two major things. The first one is I'm really excited that the employees of ABK are going to get better working conditions. It's been widely known for a long time now that people at ABK have been treated really bad. I mean, I'm not going to go into all of it, but basically it's just like they've been fighting to get into a union and it's been blocked multiple times, and then like people are being forced to crunch really hard, and there's like sexual harassment and just like all kinds of nonsense and terrible things. There's been multiple walkouts and people quitting over it, and it's just been a mess. And Xbox has said, basically at the same time that they announced this, that they're going to go in and they're going to clean that up, which I believe them for, because if you look at Glassdoor, Microsoft is like one of the best companies to work for according to employee reviews. And so I really do 100% believe that they're going to go in and they're going to make it so that none of that stuff happens anymore. It's probably going to take a while because culturally changing a company doesn't happen overnight, but we will absolutely see slow progression to getting them to the place where, frankly, they should have been the whole time. On top of that, the other thing I'm really excited for is some of the really talented studios that have been pretty much relegated to exclusively making Call of Duty or whatever they decided would make the most money, being allowed more freedom to make the games that they actually want, right? Because Xbox says that all the time. They have Game Pass, so they just need content, right? They just need people to make the things that they care about, because frankly, generally, when people make games that they're passionate about, they make better games, even if they're not necessarily ones that like are specifically designed to drain the most money out of a consumer. But if it's going into Game Pass, it doesn't have to, because the subscription is the way to drain the money out of the consumer. It's basically, instead of games as a service being about microtransactions, it's games in a service, and the service is maybe kind of the microtransaction? I don't know. Anyway, that part doesn't matter. Basically, what I'm saying is all of these teams will be allowed to do what they want for the most part, and some of them are going to choose to do new IP, some of them are going to use dormant ones, and that's really exciting to me. You know, can we get StarCraft Ghosts finally? Can the Coalition make it once they're done making Gear 6? That would be amazing. That's generally an announcement that would stop the games industry. People would be so excited for that, right? Or can we get Toys for Bob doing something with Crash or Spyro or Banjo or Conquer or any of these other platformer mascots that Xbox now owns, right? Can we get Warcraft to be allowed to expand beyond the MMO? Because it hasn't done that in a really long time, and I think that's kind of a waste of the IP, frankly, because Warcraft is one of the better known gaming IPs, and it's just been the one game for like ever, right? Because the RTSs haven't been relevant in a really long time. So can they do something, can we get like a new IP from Raven or Sledgehammer or any of those other teams? Because I don't even know what to expect from them at this point, because all I've seen them do in the last forever is Call of Duty. So I don't even really know what they're good at outside of Call of Duty. So that's really exciting. And then there's even some teams that Activision owns that have been absorbed into the bigger Call of Duty teams, like Neversoft, right? Neversoft, famously, you probably know their logo. It's the eyeball with the nail through it. They're famously the people who did, like, I think the original Tony Hawk games. That team still exists. They're just not called Neversoft anymore. They're called, I don't even know which one they were absorbed into. Treyarch, maybe? Sledgehammer? I don't know. One of them. But that team still exists, and theoretically, they could get spun back out into their own studio and start making the games that they want to make again, which would be really cool. But, like I said, none of those things are going to happen anytime soon. And I'm talking like 6 to 10 years, because they have to, first of all, finish whatever they're working on right now, which who knows how much that is. You know, the way that the Call of Duty thing works, they might be working on upwards of 3 Call of Duties at any given time, because it was an annual franchise. So I don't know how that works. And then once they're done with those games, then they have to concept and create a brand new game, and we all know how long that takes these days. It's going to be a long time before we really know what an Activision Blizzard King under Xbox is going to look like. And I'm really excited to see what that is, but it's just going to be a really long time before we get there. You know, we're going to see little aspects of it, like, oh, hey, this new Call of Duty doesn't have as egregious of microtransactions because it doesn't need to, or like, you know, little things like that. Like, we're going to see these little hints, but we're not going to fully understand the grasp of how much ABK is going to change as a result of this for possibly up to a decade. But I think once we get there, it's going to be really interesting. Now, obviously, this is a huge deal for Xbox. Like, I don't even need to really say that, do I? Right? We're talking about not just all the massive IP ownership that they're getting, not just all the tech and the talent behind those IPs, but also a huge financial gain. Call of Duty, Overwatch, World of Warcraft, Candy Crush, these things just print money, right? And that money is going directly into Microsoft, which means not only is it paying for itself, right? The deal is going to hopefully be profitable faster than most of these other deals, that acquisitions that have been made recently, but also that money is going to go back into first party to better develop their own games. So Activision's income is going to directly benefit a team like Compulsion or a team like Ninja Theory, because it's all one pot now, you know what I mean? So that's great for them. Plus, they're finally getting the mobile arm that they've always wanted in King, which is one of the most profitable mobile companies outside of China. It's massively successful. So that's what they've always wanted. Mobile is, as we've seen multiple times throughout this FTC court hearing, the fastest growing aspect of gaming and the most money-making section of it as well. So they've wanted to get into mobile for a long time, and now they are getting really deeply into it. So that's great for them. Again, I don't care, but like, again, that's money that's going to be coming in and then hopefully funneled into other first-party projects that I will care about. So that's kind of cool. And they're also getting the PC growth that they've wanted. They've been wanting to grow PC Game Pass in a major way for a very long time, and Blizzard is a major part of the PC community between StarCraft and Overwatch and all these things. I've already said all these IPs 100 times, and you already know them, but they're huge on PC. Like, they're a huge aspect of what PC players love. And so they are making huge headway into the PC. They're making huge headway into mobile. They're getting all of this amazing tech, all this amazing talent, all this amazing IP. This is a huge deal for Xbox that, honestly, I don't think anybody would have ever predicted would have been on the table. And it's so crazy, like, that we are seeing this happen before our eyes. I'm blown away. So then the question comes up, as it always does, what's next? What's Xbox's next move? Or, as most people are probably specifically asking, what's their next acquisition? Because we know they're not done, right? They still have gas they need to fill and money to spend. So we know they're going to make more acquisitions, whether we want them to or not. However, here's what I'll say. First of all, what's next is they need to finish this process. We're not done yet. Even though we know how it's going to go at this point, they've still got to do all the paperwork. They've got to actually close the deal. They've got to get to that trial in August. They've got to finalize their solution with the CMA. There's a lot of stuff that still needs to be done before ABK is a wrap, right? Is it possible that something could go dramatically wrong in that time? Yes, just very unlikely. Then, once all of that is done, I still wouldn't expect another acquisition for a little while. Like, not for at least the rest of the year. I do not expect Microsoft to make another acquisition in 2023, even a smaller one. Maybe like a really small one if like Bethesda buys some support team or something to help something out. But it's not going to be anything particularly newsworthy, if anything at all. And when they do start making acquisitions, maybe as early as next year, I would not expect another major acquisition to be their next thing. Like, don't expect the next acquisition they make to be Sega or Capcom or any of these other things. Expect smaller teams. I'm thinking something like an Asobo would make a lot of sense. I'm personally, pretty attached to Remedy. I think that would be an amazing get for them. Let me know in the comments if you want me to do a video of what studios, individual small studios, not publishers, that I would personally buy, because I haven't done a video like that in a while, and I think my answers would be dramatically different at this point. But I would expect them to do smaller studios over a publisher, at least for a little while. But once they get past that, we do know from a lot of these FTC documents and a lot of the things that have come out, we know the sorts of things that they're targeting. And a lot of those targets have been taken off the board by them buying Activision Blizzard, right? They wanted to grow in mobile. They've pretty succinctly checked that off. I'm sure they're still going to want to grow more in mobile, but they've gotten a huge step in that direction. So they don't necessarily need to do another one. They wanted to grow on PC. They just bought Blizzard, which is a huge portion of PC, as we've talked about earlier. So again, that's a big check. The two major gaps that I was able to identify were that they still want to grow in APAC, which is the Asia Pacific region. So Japan, China, I think technically Australia, but like mostly Asia. As well as they want multimedia capabilities. They want IP that can expand beyond gaming, and you could argue that they have that. Gears of War could very easily do a movie or TV show. I think they've already announced that they're doing one. Fallout's got a show coming. Halo had a show, even though it was bad. Like, they have IP that does that, but it seems to me, based on what they were looking for, that they didn't just want IP, but they might actually want capability of making those shows and movies themselves. So that's interesting, and potentially another video idea if you want to see that. If you also want to see another breakdown after all of, I'll promise it right now. Once this ABK deal is officially finished, I will make another video about breaking down what publishers I think are likely targets in the future, and I'll go through all of the ones. Right now that several of them are off the table, again, it's a dramatically different list than the last time I did that video, and I think it is generally pretty popular with you guys, so I think you'd be excited for that. But yeah, so probably nothing for the rest of the year. Smaller things after that, and then maybe after that, like I'm talking like not even 2024, but maybe like 2025, maybe they'll pick up a publisher in Japan, like a Sega. Everyone's really, Sega makes a lot of sense, or something that has big IP that do multimedia, like a WB, right? Those would be two that I think are very likely targets. But the fact of the matter is, ABK is a huge acquisition, and it's going to take a lot of work to get it integrated with Xbox, even though Activision Blizzard is probably going to operate largely separately. It's going to be a subsidiary. It won't be like literally the same aspect of Xbox. Like, Matt Booty is not going to be in charge of things going on over there, right? He's going to probably talk to them and collaborate, but they will operate independently. Even so, there's going to be a lot of aspects that they need to integrate. They're going to need to get their publishing and their marketing and all that sort of going in tandem so that they're not stepping on each other's toes. That's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of time. And when you pair that on top of, correcting their cultural problems and figuring out what that company wants to be going forward, now that their financial situation is very, very different, the ABK situation is going to take a lot of time for them to 100% figure out what they're doing and getting settled into what they want to do with it. And I think we just need to give them the time to get that done. But now that this case, or this merger, can be closed, that work can start today. So let me know in the comments below what you're feeling about this deal. Are you excited because you just want these games in Game Pass? Are you interested to see what ABK is going to become in the future? Are you upset because you didn't want this deal to go through for one reason or another? Just generally looking for sort of a vibe check on this whole deal coming to a close. And while you're down there, as always, let me know what you want me to talk about in the next video. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, maybe share it with a friend or whatever. It's the holy trinity of things YouTubers love for you to do. It's chicken soup for the algorithm. Anyway, until next time, I'll see you around.